Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting for Bedford Township for December 17th. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, if Pastor Steve Hobbins could come on up and open us up in prayer. He's with the Lewis Avenue Baptist Church. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's pray. Father, I pray that you bless this meeting. Pray that you give us wisdom. Pray that you would watch over and superintend everything. Pray, Father, that you would allow us during this Christmas season to remember you and your birth. I pray that you would just help us to focus on you. Appreciate the hard work of all the people going into this. We ask for your blessing now in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you so much. Okay, item number 2 is approval of the agenda. We need to remove item 8I due to lack of information.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended. Support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item number 3 is the consent agenda. The agenda committee recommends to A, approve and place on file the minutes of the December 3rd, 2019 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board. B, accept and place on file the general savings, pooled funds, and CD reports from the treasurer. D, accept with regret the resignation of Dan Rock from the Green Initiatives Committee, effective immediately. E, reappoint Todd Hirschberger to the Fire Advisory Board for a second term ending 12/31/21. F, reappoint Phil Konesecker to the Fire Department Advisory Board for a third term ending 12/31/21. G, reappoint Diane Stark to the Fire Department Advisory Board for a first term ending 12/31/21. H, reappoint Lair Welch to the Fire Department Advisory Board for a second term ending 12/31/21. I, accept with resignation of Aaron Rounds from the Board of Review, effective immediately. K, reappoint Phil Konesecker to the Board of the Review for a third term ending 12/31/21. L, reappoint Jerry Teby to the Board of Review for a sixth term ending 12/31/21. M, reappoint Joe Garvick to the Planning Commission for a second term ending 12/31/22. N, appoint Brad Helm to the Planning Commission for a first term ending 12/31/22. O, appoint Patrick Mahoney to the Planning for a first term ending 12/31/22.
Mr. Supervisor, I would move to approve the consent agenda with consideration to remove agenda item N and 0 for discussion.
I'll second.
Okay, motion is supported. Discussion?
I mean discussion later on the agenda.
When would you like to discuss it? Couldn't we discuss it now and move on with it?
We could discuss it, I guess. It's not going to be a short discussion, but.
That's fine. We gotta do it sometime tonight.
After looking over the, first of all, I want to say that I'm glad that the clerk's department includes the, all the applicants when it's a new appointment. I don't have any opposition to being on the consent agenda reappointments because we know those people, they have served. We know that they are entitled to another session or term if they so choose. But when we have new appointments, people who have not served in the capacity of whatever commission it is, I think that the board should be able to discuss the potential appointments that are recommended by the supervisor. I don't have any problem with Brad Helm. I know Brad, he's done work in our home. He's an excellent in his field, and I think I respect him to the utmost. However, I don't know Patrick Mahoney, but that really doesn't make any difference because I don't always know everyone before they serve. However, when we have other applicants, one being a person who's had an application in since 2018, and Mr. Helm happens to work in the field of planning, whereby there could be conflict of interest on some issues that come before the Planning Commission. I'm just concerned. I'm not concerned about his integrity. I'm concerned about him being put in a position of having to discuss or make decisions in planning areas where there might be a conflict of interest. And yes, he could recuse himself, but if there's an opportunity to appoint someone who wouldn't have to recuse themselves, that's just my comment.
Well, it doesn't matter who you appoint, you could have a conflict at some point, you just don't know. I believe that the builder should have some representation. You know, he's, in my opinion, knows the field, and we need some knowledge and experience on this board as well, with that field, you know. So I think it's a good idea to have him on. And if you have a conflict of interest to where they have a monetary gain, they recuse themselves. You know, I think it's few and far between. In the past, we've had builders on, Arnie Jennings, what was one other one we've had? So we've had builders in the past, and, you know, if there's a conflict, they recuse. That's why, you know, they have 7 board members.
Well, possibly they were appointed because no one else applied. My point, in addition, is that we have other applicants here that would not have a conflict. You know, the Planning Commission, I'm the trustee. As liaison to the Planning Commission, I have absolutely no experience in building, but I do have understanding and knowledge of what I want Bedford Township to look like and what I think my constituents want Bedford Township to look like. And to me, it's more about that. It's planning and zoning that deals with not the construction of a home, because we have engineers and attorneys that look over those things. It has to do with the development of Bedford Township and having residents from the township. There's nothing in the law that says you have to have experience in any of those areas. And having residents from the township that have a desire and an interest in what kind of development we do want. And I don't want Alexis Road in Bedford Township, so my concern when things come before the planning has to do with, does this fit for the plan, the master plan that Bedford Township has?
Keep in mind, if we're gonna have Alexis Road, Bedford Township can't control that. Because if something's zoned for what they wanna do on it, they can do it, and we
If
can't.
it's zoned, but we don't have to zone it.
Correct,
It's up to us to zone it, so we don't zone it to become an Alexis Road.
correct. I think it's a good idea to have him on, personally.
Well, obviously, it was your recommendation.
I've looked at the applications, and I think he's the best choice. And plus, we want new people to serve. I don't think Brad has served. So,
I would just
Am I
say,
correct?
so I would agree with Paul on, I think it makes sense to have someone who has experience in whatever field in that kind of capacity in like a planning commission. And I don't know anything about that, but I would agree with new appointments not being on consent agenda. That was your initial point, correct? And why removing them? I would agree with that. And I'm glad you brought it up because it was something when I was looking through this, it's something I kind of, just kind of thought about in my head of, should that be separate? So I'm glad that you brought that up because I would agree with that. If new appointments should be something separate to be discussed at least in this regard and looked over and then voted upon, like as separate line items.
any more comments or?
Mr. Supervisor, my only is that
anytime there's a vacancy, the composition of the current board has to be factored in as to who's going to fill the slot. The needs of the overall commission take more precedent over the names on the applications. If in fact you've considered that and you selected the applicant that you feel like best fills and complements that commission, then, I would support that. I would only not support that if there was something really obvious or a very clear problem. And so I think absent of that, I have no objection to the consent agenda. But as a parliamentary procedure, right now we have a motion to accept the agenda minus those two. So we're going to have to clarify.
For discussion.
Yeah, just
So-
just for discussion?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
what it was,
all right.
for discussion. Can I make a comment about what TC said? Oh. Well, the statute says that the supervisor has the authority to recommend members of the planning commission with approval of the board.
Sure.
So just because the supervisor has recommended doesn't mean that there aren't other applicants. I mean, Robert Potter put in his application in 2018. I've heard this board ask for people to come forward and put application in for being on boards and commissions. Here, this one's set here for a year. Why isn't he? He's a very active member of the community, and I just think that we overlook people like this. He's got a degree in civil engineering and master's degree in civil engineering. I mean, how could you say that one person in the field has more qualifications than another one in the field?
Well, the reason I did that was because Bob just termed out from BZA. And Rick, how many terms can you go on BZA before you're termed out? I think it's 3 in a row.
I think it's correct. 3.
We're trying to get new people involved. And I talked to Bob, he was in the office. I mean, Bob wants to get involved more. And I ultimately look at all the applications and put the people that I think would fit best. And if the board doesn't like it, the board can pull it off.
I understand that, Mr. Supervisor. This is not personal.
Oh, no, I'm not taking
you
it
know,
personal.
I'm not saying you did something or there's a mistake made. I'm offering a different opportunity or suggestion.
Okay, I'm fine with it.
So we had our discussion. I'm ready to vote if you're ready to vote.
Okay, yeah. Any more discussion?
What is are we voting on, like, approving it, taking N and O off?
No,
No, it
Okay,
was up for
just to
discussion,
discuss that.
and which we did, so it would be approving it.
yeah.
Could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye. Motion passed 7-0. Item 4, presentations, informational report on the Downtown Development Authority. Joyce, come on up. Thanks for being here. Make sure that microphone's on, too.
Let me just introduce Joyce. Joyce has been on the DDA, as you know, for a very long time, so it's a pleasure to have her tonight again. Talk about DDA matters.
Yes, I'm still here and still on the DDA. As many of you know, I've been on the DDA since actually before it was formally put together. I was on kind of the drafting committee and wrote the first, first draft of our general plan for the Downtown Development Authority. Anyway, the reason I'm here is, and this is the second time, apparently there was a meeting back in September I wasn't able to make, but the act that governs the Downtown Development Authority, and as a Downtown Development Authority, we're able to engage in tax increment financing, and those laws were kind of recodified back in 2018 and now require a couple of informational meetings a year. So this is the second one, and here I am. Again, you've all heard this before, but we're just going to do it again. As you know, the DDA was formed in 1996, and we did that in order to widen the Secor Stearns intersection and update the infrastructure. That was to improve travel and reduce accidents. At the time, it was the most dangerous intersection in Monroe County. In case you don't know, just as a bit of, I don't know, background or something, Bill Decker, the builder, was actually the one who sort of became aware of downtown development authorities and brought the idea from another township where he was doing some building or work to our then supervisor, Pearl Albert Green, as a way to fund the needed improvements, because it was bad. You know, I was there, and I lived very close to that area, and it was pretty dangerous. And so we have those folks to thank for getting this whole thing kind of started over 20 years ago. Anyway, we did widen, you know, the intersection and everything, improved the infrastructure there, and it was all completed pretty much in the year 2000. We issued bonds, actually, at first, because we really didn't have the funds for the tax increment financing, you know, that we could capture to actually pave the roads and everything. So we issued bonds, but they were retired in 2012. The DDA was reapproved to exist in 2010, and we've continued to work on economic growth, connectivity, in other words, you know, walkability and connectivity between the businesses, and beautification, which I hope you've noticed over there. Again, a little bit of background. The DDA's authority is derived from Public Act 57 of 2018. And the primary purpose of a downtown development authority is to promote economic growth. It allows for the capture of the incremental growth of property taxes to fund public improvements within its boundaries. These taxes would otherwise be paid to the county and other entities such as the library and the community college. But we're able to retain that little bit of incremental tax increase and use it right here in Bedford Township to improve that area. We are able to fund actually new projects too, can lead to new development opportunities. The board consists of a DDA resident, people having property or business interests within the boundaries of the DDA, and the township supervisor. I'm a general member of the DDA. I live just outside the boundary. Now, what can a DDA do? Well, we can do, obviously, road improvements, since we did, and we've since done resurfacing, curb and gutter replacements and repair, water and sewer projects, marketing, streetscape, public parks, Pearl Albert Park to name one, parking facilities, property acquisition, property improvements. We can also do things, you know, involved with like senior centers and, community farmers markets sort of thing and whatever. Now, the DDA is not really like a committee of the township like some other committees. We exist somewhat separately under Michigan law. However, we do have a relationship with the township board, and that involves budget approval. The DDA has to prepare a budget and submit our budget for approval to the township board for the operation of the DDA every year. We have to keep up a current general development plan and tax increment financing plan, which we recently restated and adopted in 2017, incorporating the 2015 DDA master plan. And we appoint our own members, but they are subject to approval by the township board in accordance with PA 57 of 2018. So, our vision and goals, well, we're trying to create a pedestrian-friendly environment in an area that's attractive to passing motorists, invites people to shop, is pleasant and safe for walking between the businesses. We establish a cohesive green design theme And we will thank Bill Decker, a former member of the DDA, who is very active and interested in green design issues and, green issues in general in the environment. And we've gone with that green idea to focus on energy efficiency, stormwater best management practices, and all of this to kind of instill some community pride for what we're doing there. And of course, we promote economic growth. We encourage existing property owners to invest in building renovations, entice new owners to locate and invest in the area, and attract the attention of shoppers and community residents. So far, we've had a number of accomplishments. We've been in existence for, well, it's going on almost 25 years. Well, obviously, the intersection improvements back starting in 1997, the Pearl Albert Green Park in front of Kroger's, which incidentally, we are working with someone to try to mitigate the invasive, the grasses that are growing there that can actually, kind of take over the township. So we are working to try to limit that and get rid of it. Lighting installation, we put in decorative solar lights at the park in 2015. This was kind of an initial thing that we did to see if they might work as a lighting alternative and a green alternative throughout the downtown area. However, we found that in this environment that we had the panel that we have to put up is so large in order to, efficiently capture the sunlight that when we went to additional lighting, we decided it aesthetically didn't quite fit our needs. So we did go with LED lighting and did the best we could with that. But right now, the solar isn't quite where we need it to be. Buddy's property site, we did a DEQ evaluation and monitoring for cleanup in 2015 and 17. And as you will note, there is now new development on that property. It was a brownfield site that was cleaned up by the DEQ. We've had road repairs and improvements, sidewalk improvements, streetscape improvements. We were able to put in a mast arm signal at the intersection, low decorative fences, benches, street lights, lighting, and street trees. And hopefully, I'm kind of looking at some of those the fences and looking to see maybe about putting additional plantings and so forth around them. Anyway, so I think we've been busy, and I'll just go for a few things. With regard to the Buddy's property cleanup in 2015 to 17, it took letters from MDEQ, from business owners, the DDA, and township supervisor, and in coordination with Manick and Smith Group to get something done on there. It was regarded as a orphan site and didn't exactly put the owner in charge of doing something about it. So eventually DEQ did after we pestered them to death. Anyway, let's see, sidewalk improvements. We've, been trying to do a lot with the sidewalks. Now, let me just add something to that whole discussion. Some people bring up the issue of, well, there's sidewalks to nowhere. Well, yes, but understand, at the moment, but understand that the money that we are able to capture through tax increment financing, we can only use within the boundaries of the DDA. So if sidewalks lead to subdivisions or what else, we cannot use the money to do that. However, we continue to work with the township to look for other ways to connect what we're able to put in with like subdivisions and other areas of the township. So we continue to work on that. And the idea is that they will be sidewalks eventually to a lot of different places. But, stay tuned. I'm just talking really about that. Future projects, we're looking to possibly install traffic signals at Quail Hollow and Stearns and Quail Hollow and Secor. Manick and Smith did look into a grant for us, possibly in order to do that, but at this time we are not successful. However, in particular at Quail Hollow and Secor, given all the traffic that's coming through now. We will be talking further about that. You know, with or without a grant, we will be looking at trying to do something about that. Continued sidewalk improvements, which will include some agreements that have been made with business owners to develop sidewalks between businesses that are connective sort of things that increase the walkability. And we will continue to enhance the landscaping and beautification of the area. I will apologize for something. Paul and I kind of missed something in an email, and therefore, we didn't get the banners done in time to put them up we have new banners and lights for the holiday decorations that were to have gone up in the area. But I guess we didn't read through the emails and realize that something had to be measured and further information had to be given to Bronner's. So we did put the old lights up, but look in spring, we do have some new banners that will be put up to celebrate Bedford Township, and I think you'll find them very attractive. And next winter, look for some really nice decorations, and we will be looking for a little more on sale at Bronner's, so it should be a nice display for next year, but apologize for this year. We will continue with street lighting installation, develop programming and marketing to support events, develop a campaign and strategies to market any vacant properties. Of course, there aren't a lot at the moment, but at any rate, we are looking at, we encourage our business owners to improve, repair, screen dumpsters, you know, clean up their area and so forth. And we continue to look at with the improvements and the traffic that has been coming through here for the last 20 years, we have a lot of traffic, you know, frankly, and there are a lot of curb cuts and so forth. So we continue to look at ways to increase the safety in that area. So that is my presentation, if there are any questions.
Couple of quick comments that we do hear a lot. It's why don't we expand the DDA? Could you touch on that?
Yes, and that has been brought up. And there have been a couple of places where we would have loved to be able to expand the area of the DDA. Unfortunately, if we did that, we would have to go back to all the entities that agreed to let us capture their portion of tax increases and get approvals on all of those. And at this point, I wouldn't want to risk, I mean, it would put everything up for, you know, renewal on this whole thing. So it would be like going back to square one on the whole thing. And it's not to say at this point that the library, the community college and so forth would be as amenable at this point, you know, to do that. So we have seriously looked at it, but have realized it isn't feasible at this time.
Any comments or questions for Joyce? Thank you for the presentation, and I do appreciate everything you do for the group.
Thank you.
A lot of knowledge and experience. Okay. Moving on to 4B, volunteer recognition for Save Our Seniors program and update by the ordinance department. Officer Cecil?
Good evening and welcome. I was told to keep this really brief because somebody had an appointment to go to, so I told her she'd have about an hour to wait, so we'll go from there. The Save Our Seniors program was an idea that I came up with last year in regards to helping out seniors in the community. What would happen is, in the ordinance department, we would get contacted by people complaining of various property deficiencies within the township. Sometimes we'd be sending out letters only to discover that the people that were living there were senior citizens. They were either disabled, had medical problems, and weren't able to comply sometimes with our ordinance. They had no family close by that could help them out. So This program that we come up with is kind of unique. There's not a whole lot of in the community, but the SOS program, Save Our Seniors, was my idea. But truly tonight, the people that are to be honored are the people that made my idea come to fruition. These are people that are in the community that have dedicated their personal time and effort when we've called upon them to come out and help our seniors clean up whatever the situation was, do work in the community, and things of that nature. So that's what makes our program a success. So if I could have Gene Stock, Sam Pitson, Ray Houston, Steve Lordenslager, and Rick Hoke. Yep, they're all in order. That's Ray Houston. Look and see if you got his name. And Sam, did you look inside? No, you didn't give them the right ones. You gave Rick the
Rick, you got the wrong one. I grouped up a little bit. You don't have Jim.
Okay. There was a few others that were supposed to be here, but unfortunately, they couldn't make it. Mr. Houston has accepted some of those. They had other things that they had to do. But ladies and gentlemen, I really would like you to give them applause to these people.
If you guys could just move down, we'll get a quick picture with the Board of Trustees real quick.
Damon, could you at least mention the other folks that are part of this program that could not be here tonight?
Absolutely.
Recognize them.
We had Jim Perkins, who was supposed to be here, Brandon Chase, who was supposed to be here, and we had
Come on in, Nancy.
Mr. Nathan Nash, Tyler Ball, and Adam Beeman.
Hi, over here. Okay, one more.
Well, hold on, get one with Damon. Damon, you're the guy for this. Come on over. Hurry up. Come on. It's your program.
That is true.
Minus all those other ones. There we go.
Okay,
Stay in front of
everybody
Nancy.
Smile. A lot of faith.
Did you get Nancy in that?
I'm trying.
Probably help if you
She's
took the
trying to
lens-
hide back
Probably
there.
help if you took the lens
Okay,
cap
no
off.
hiding.
Yeah.
What would you like?
Take off the lens
Take the lens cap off.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Rick. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate you.
Our volunteers in Bedford Township are truly amazing. They always come through, so we appreciate you guys.
And just a few other accomplishments that I'd like to give you with the ordinance department this year, what we've done. We were present this year also at the trade fair, made contacts with community members, passed out our new ordinance books, some senior booklets that we acquired. Our department assisted this year with the community cleanup day we had. We have sent out new requests for new ordinances and updates to be done to the township so that the language is more clear in certain ordinances that we have. This year, for the first time, we became proactive on our illegal burning. We did so by adding 2 additional employees to the ordinance department on a seasonal basis. As a result of that, this year, unlike any other year, we shut down over 300 illegal burns in our department. By doing so, this saved the fire department from running out on 300 calls. Speaking with the chief, those calls can range anywhere from $100 a run to $400 a run, so it's about a $31,000 savings to the fire department. This year, while we were out on Halloween, patrolling the neighborhoods for illegal burning, our officers that we had out there also passed out candy to the kids, made contacts with the community, and got well receptive for doing so. And that candy came about as a result of our officers and myself donating our own money to purchase that, so no township funds were used. The other thing we did this year, for the first time, our department sponsored 2 families in this community for Thanksgiving. We reached out to churches and to the schools, to 2 families that had need for Thanksgiving dinner. And again, we took our own money and bought them the items necessary to give them a Thanksgiving dinner this year. So that's what the ordinance department is doing in regards to accomplishments, working with the community. Currently, we're working on our Snowbird House Check program. Also, I designed that in that we now have people that, seniors and stuff that go out of town, they're not back until after the first of the year. They can contact the ordinance department, fill out the appropriate paperwork, and we go out and check their houses and make sure that they're secure. That's the second year of this program, and it's doing really well. Just some of the other things, excuse me, is this year we were up to 615 complaints that we actually handled, compared to last year where we were at 297 at this time. So we've increased our presence. In doing so, we had 54 cases of blight that we were able to clean up in the township, 4 of which we only had to take to court. So I'm very proud of the people that work in my office and the community that has supported us. And that's all I have, unless you have some questions.
Any comments or question for Mr. Cecil? Thank you so much, Damon, for
You're welcome.
for all your hard work.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you. Okay, next up is public comment. Comments limited to 2 minutes for board agenda items only. Come on up.
Good evening, Logan Tisdale, 1308 Brandywine Street. This is in regards to the information Monroe County Sheriff's Contract Summary Report for November 2019. In the monthly summary report you have in front of you for November 2019, there were 21 deputies that worked 540.75 hours on patrol at a cost of $23,252 at $43 per hour, and wrote a total of 7 traffic citations during those hours. Each citation cost taxpayers $3,321.75. There were 53 accidents in the month of November 2019. For the first 3 months of 2019, the sheriffs logged 1,634 hours on patrol at a cost of $70,262 at $43 per hour. They wrote 6 traffic citations during those hours on patrol at a cost of $11,710 per citation. In those 3 months, there were 159 accidents. If you take the first 3 months of this year and November this year and add patrol hours, number of accidents, number of citations, and number of traffic accidents, the numbers are staggering. A total of 2,174.75 patrol hours in those 4 months alone cost the taxpayers $93,514.25. The 13 traffic citations written during those patrol hours cost the taxpayers $7,193.40 per 1 traffic ticket. The kicker is the 212 traffic accidents in those 4 hours. It took the Monroe County Sheriffs 167.2 hours on patrol to write 1 traffic ticket. That's the equivalent of somebody working for 4 weeks, over 40 hours on patrol, just to find 1 traffic citation. Wonder why we have 212 accidents in those 4 months? This year, there's 471 accidents, not including the months of June and December. This is not community policing, this is community fleecing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, moving on to staff reports. A resolution, approval of a resolution amending the 2019-2020 general fund budget. Mr. Manning?
Good evening. We're 5 months into the fiscal year, and some of the budgets need to be adjusted. Some revenue items are increasing. We're just going to hit on the highlights. Board approved attorney fees for Mr. Nance. That was an extra $6,500. Excuse me. Assessing, budget's been increased $12,500. For software expenses, legal fees, and contracted services. Building and grounds have gone up $10,000 for seasonal help. Emergency management, I see this is on the agenda for this evening. Warning siren has to be replaced, and that has an approximate cost of $25,000. Roads, the roundabout was not budgeted, and that's an additional $175,000. So that's the main items in the general fund. Any questions? Try to answer them best as I can.
Ms. Tinberry?
I'm not understanding why the roundabout wasn't in the budget.
Pardon me?
I'm not understanding why the roundabout wasn't in the budget. It's been talked about for more than a year.
I don't know, when we were doing the budgets, nothing came up about it.
The people on the roads committee didn't mention it to you? It's not in there?
No, sorry.
Why is the $6,500 for Phil Nance, who looked over the contract for the fire department, why is that in the trustees' budget?
Because the trustees wanted Nance to review it.
Nancy, back to your question about the round, it is budgeted. I don't know how it's in the budget.
Okay, well, let me
Just so
get
you
this
know.
question answered first.
I don't know how that
The
got.
trustees, this whole board is the board of trustees, including the supervisor, clerk, and treasurer. So did some of it come out of their budget too?
No,
No. Well, I think that that's misappropriated out of the trustees' budget because why didn't it come out of the legal fees? I'm not talking to just you, David. This isn't about you.
I know it's not.
Okay.
Well, I did it that way because the board wanted it done. So therefore, I thought it should come out of the board budget.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, well, I disagree. I think it's a legal fee, should come out of legal fees. I've mentioned this before, and I think the finance department is doing a much better job of bringing these to us before the end of the fiscal year. However, you know, this is the deal. We have to pay our bills, so you have to approve the budget amendments.
Right.
Okay? I don't like being put in that position. I would rather, we set a budget for every department in the township. And I probably should be looking this way because these are the people that this board sets the budget. And when we set the budget, that's what we plan on spending. But what happens is, nobody comes back to this board and says, can we spend this now? Because it's not in the budget. Can we go ahead and make this budget adjustment before we spend it? Before we have to come back? You know, I mean, I can't vote against this because you have to pay your bills. But I would rather be asked to approve the money before I'm asked to pay the bill. In my home, which is different than the government, I get that, but in my home, I can't go out and buy a new car and tell my husband, here's a bill, you need to pay it. We have to decide ahead of time if I get a new car, okay? So it's just backwards, and I've said before, the cart before the horse, but these things need to be approved to be purchased before we have to approve the bill, because Am I the only trustee that sees it that way, or?
No, I completely concur and would like to get the 6,500 moved to start, and then I want to circle back to the roundabout conversation.
What about getting the approvals for the payment before, I get this whole thing.
I completely agree.
I get this whole thing about the election. I totally understand it from the clerk's perspective. I totally understand it. And to me, this, putting it on as a budget amendment should have been put on as a need to add 46,000 to her elections budget. And in a way it is, because we haven't had that election yet. So in a way, she's getting this approved ahead of time. However, I'm just not, I mean, we approve a budget 5 months. You just said 5 months into the budget, and we're also, now we need to come up with this 182,000 for a road. I mean, it just boggles my mind. But I'm sorry, I don't mean to be impatient. It just, my husband won't let me do it, and so I don't think I should let this board do it.
Mr. Steiner?
Well, I'm sure we've all been accused of being impatient at one time or another, so don't worry about that, Nancy.
More than others.
Actually, Nancy brought this up in the past, and we discussed this on this board about bringing things to the board before we have to go through large budget amendments. I will say that we did talk about roads previously. So again, Paul are going to talk about that, I think, because I do remember we've discussed that number. It doesn't make sense. I would agree with the 6,500 on your legal. The community action, I believe that is for our recycling, correct, Paul? Isn't it?
I'm not exactly
And
sure.
because I think, and if that's what the recycling is, then we voted to have that money paid out, so that one was in the budget.
That's
So-
the yard
Is
waste.
That's what I'm saying. So the
that's
recycling.
budgeted
Oh,
for.
Yep.
okay.
So some of this stuff, maybe we need to improve on the terminology on some of it, because we did talk about it in budget time. But Nancy's right, definitely, and this whole board agreed to it, that these large expenditures, I mean, we've got the siren on tonight, okay? Maybe we should have had the siren on here to vote before we went with the budget. As simple as that. I mean, granted, it's the same meeting, but that's the idea of it, getting those expenditures out in front of us. I mean, the siren, it's something we have to have. It's just something that, it's a community safety issue, so we know we're going to go ahead and move forward with something like that, but we need to follow a process and stick with a process.
So I put the siren on there. I didn't know it was going to be on a meeting tonight.
But
I
that's what
thought
I'm saying, but
I
if
thought it was
anything,
something that the community should have as a warning.
but again, that should be voted on before we go for a budget adjustment, whether it's this meeting or another meeting prior to this meeting. That's all I'm trying to say. So we too many times we get the cart before the horse, and thank God that we've got a good finance stream within Bedford Township, but someday if people want to follow our legacy and our footsteps and say, well, they always did it that way in the past, let's just continue, that sooner or later somebody's going to get caught.
True.
That's all.
Can you explain, like, even just for the public, the elections?
The elections?
Mhm.
I didn't budget enough money for the March election, with all the new laws and the changes
Okay.
and the new items we have to purchase.
Okay.
But on the good side, we're going to get reimbursed for it. So anything we put out, we're going to be reimbursed, but I need the money there to be reimbursed. So we have to pay it out, then we'll get reimbursed.
Perfect. Is it reimbursed by the state?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, some of it will be paid from, I just found out one of the schools is at Mason. Mason's putting on a ballot, so they're going to have to reimburse us for part of it too. But otherwise, it'll be the state.
So you want to go back to the roads then?
Mr. Francis, go ahead. You said it was in the budget.
Yes, it was. The $1.5 million that was the original budget did include $175,000 for the roundabout contribution. It is
I
in
wasn't
there.
aware of that, I'm sorry.
Where I'm, I guess I would recommend leaving the budget adjustment in as David presented it, only because we underspent the budgeted amount the year before. Some of the bills come floating in late.
Right.
That we've had to pay that really were budgeted last fiscal year. It's a timing difference, and the road commission is several months behind billing when the actual job gets done. So if they do it in June, we aren't gonna get the bill until September maybe. But we have to book it in June, so it's a floating number. I guess I'd leave it where it is. I think we're okay budget-wise. It's just that it's gonna include some stuff that was in last year's budget that we're not paying until this year. It would be nice if we could have and we've asked the road commission, give us the stuff that's in the pipeline so we can budget it. And we've gotten some information on it, but we always get bills that are 2 or 3 months after the work is done, and then we pay them. Our fiscal year is different than the road commission's
Right.
fiscal year,
Right.
and that doesn't help with aligning the budgets.
In their defense, they, the way they can only bill out what bills they get in, so
Correct.
they bill out the stone, for instance, for the base, and then they bill out the asphalt, and they bill out their own maintenance. I mean, they have to bill it out separately because of the way they get bills in. So I understand the difference in their fiscal year. So understanding that, I would agree that there's probably bills that were not budgeted that are yet to, or maybe not yet to pay, but had been paid out of what we already budgeted, so I understand that. I guess I just want to see on here, when I go through the accounting of what these separate amounts are, I just, like you said, the payments to Mulch King for disposal of yard waste, I mean, I don't know how much was budgeted offhand, but I know we did budget because we talked about that. So I think that maybe before this gets to us, there should be some continuity with the full-time officials and the finance director. So what are you saying, Paul, that we should approve the amendments as presented, except for the trustees, 6,500? Do you agree with that? That should come out of the trustees' amount? You're a trustee. How come it's not coming out of your budget, too?
The tough thing is you have stuff like an assessing that has come up this year. You can't plan for it. And then at budgeting time, we're trying to cut it as much as we possibly can, and then a major thing pops up, and you need $8,000 in legal. You know, the situation I'm talking about with legal, I don't know if that can even come to the board before, you know, because it's probably confidential, I would think. You know, I mean, so there's certain things like, you know, we have an issue in my office right now where I had to bring somebody seasonally in. You know, I mean, I didn't budget for that. You know, so there's certain things that aren't buildings and grounds. We plan for the same seasonal people every year, yet we're off, you know, money for seasonal, which I don't know. Like
All
I
I'm
said, some of these
asking
things.
is that you come to the board. You didn't budget for it, that's understandable. I appreciate you holding tight to the budget as a trustee, but when you need it, just come to the board. We have 2 meetings a month. Can't you come to the board and say, we had this excessive legal expenditure in assessing, and we're gonna need to, you know, put more money in the budget for that? I mean, this is software expense. Software, I mean, you don't know you're gonna have software? Contracted services, I don't mind amending the budget. I want to hear about it before I'm asked to pay the bill. That's what this is. We need this in the budget to pay the bill.
Mr. Francis?
Nancy, you're exactly right.
Thank you, Paul.
Sometimes we get the cart before the horse. We need to be better at anticipating what our budget needs are and get it approved before we spend the money. And there are some instances that we've seen over the years where we've gotten the bill, oh, we went over budget. I don't think that's
But that's when you get,
legally proper. It's a timing difference that we need to work on, keep an eye on. So I agree with you, Nick.
But Paul, every year we get accused of padding the budget then too.
Well,
Why you put money in there that you don't need or you're not planning for it? You know, I mean, it's, it's not that easy.
that's true.
Stuff
and-
comes up. You can't foresee everything that's gonna happen, and some of these things, like I just said with the assessing, you just come to the board and say, hey, you know, he walks in my office, says, hey, we got this situation, it's, well, hey, we gotta wait 2 weeks to go before the board, it's, no, you gotta make a move. You know, I mean, there's certain
You're not
things.
paying the bill at that point.
But I think to Nancy's point, and I agree with both of you, it really is a transparency issue. And I don't think very little comes to the board that gets shot down. I think it's just ultimately, it's our responsibility to watch the budget, and when everybody here at one point in time talked about fiscal responsibility entails having good numbers. You know, I think one of my frustrations is the veracity of the numbers becomes a concern. And what I think this is pointing out is at the end of our budget for the next year, we should be signing off on a final budget as opposed to having a final cow with adjustments to be made. I think that is an error that I know I will take 1/7 ownership of. My assumption is that when we leave a cow and we say, these are the adjustments that need to get made for the year, they're gonna get made for the year. But ultimately, if they don't get made, you know, I'll stand up and take my lumps and say, I should have double-checked that. And so I feel like something we need to add to our budget process is a final budget, all amendments included, so every single one of us can check it off and be sure that everything we've discussed in those meetings is getting represented, because it is frustrating to work so hard to keep our budget where it is and try to be so responsible, and then have these adjustments that throw off, you know, other plans.
Any more comments?
The budget is just a guide. It's not a cast in stone document. It's a guide. This is what we think we're going to need to spend. I think if you read the statute says you can't spend the money unless the board approves you spending the money.
And I completely agree,
So that
except
falls right in
largely
where
what,
Nancy's coming from.
yeah, but largely what's wrong with government is that's the talking point. Well, it's just a guide. We'll spend what we need to. It's just a guide. That's fundamentally the problem. There is a budget, there's a known level of income that comes in, and no one's doing anything wrong, no one's doing anything, you know, inappropriate, but we just need to be better at hitting our guesses, if you will. And when we don't, identifying them early so that we're pre-approving expenditures versus coming back after the fact and saying, whoops, you know.
I think maybe we ought to charge the department heads with that responsibility. If they come up with a unanticipated expenditure that they didn't think of when we were forming the budget, and if they pay for that item, whatever it is, it's gonna go over budget. We ought to know that right then.
Right.
And we have to fix that responsibility to someone, and maybe it's the department head. I don't think that's gonna be difficult to do. It's just that I think we need to work on it. To me, that's being totally transparent. You can never guess exactly the exact dollar you're gonna spend in a budget.
Agreed.
You forecast, we base it on an assumption. Well, if the assumption changes a little bit, your budget number is gonna be off, but you should know that before that. If you needed a truck, like a truck blew up or whatever, if you anticipated that and put it in the budget, fine. If you didn't, before you order the truck, the township has to approve it. And then budget increase at that time. And I think we've done that in some cases, but we need to be consistent with it.
Ms. Hirschberger?
Well, that's exactly what I've been doing, elections. I knew I was gonna go over, so I went to
Correct.
Dave and I said, I'm gonna need an adjustment before this election. The same thing with the streetlights. We knew the gas streetlights were gonna go over because we found out they needed all these repairs, so we're putting it in the budget. I mean, that's a guess of what we think it's gonna, we don't have a number yet. So we put a number in there saying, we think
Right.
this is what it's gonna cost when they repair all of those. So I can tell you the streetlights and the elections are before any bills have been paid. We're trying to catch it ahead of time. But everybody just did that, just go to
So-
Dave, and we're looking at this.
Mhm.
It
So-
may go
Exactly.
over, we need an adjustment to it.
So the roundabout was budgeted for. The
Community action.
community action was budgeted for. I would call into question what are some of these other things that budgeted for as well. I mean, we missed those two. So,
This is a good exercise, I think, for a board to go through, because we always need to be aware of these things. We can never just assume that what we did 6 months ago when we formed the budget is gonna be good now. We need to keep our eye on it all the time, and I think that's the whole idea of a budget and a review to it and an amendment.
I agree.
Well, one of the things that I mentioned a long time ago, and I don't want to try to say I'm going to force you into more work as the full-timers, but it really is the full-timers and department heads that do control this. But I made a recommendation a long time ago that said, if you're going to have an expenditure that's going to put you X amount % over your budget in that area, that's when you need to raise the red flag. Bring that up to the board saying, I'm going to go 15% over my budget because of X. Now you've got an idea. I mean, Trudy did the right thing. She's got the elections. We know it's going to hit. She's coming forward saying, we're going to have this money. Granted, she does not have an exact number. We all get that. The number is tough to hit it to the penny. But she's got an idea of what expenses are. Lighting, okay, I'm sure we didn't just say throw a number in for the replace the gas lighting. We've got to have an idea of estimates, what they said it should cost, at least that's something. So we put that into that percentage calculation and said, okay, board, township board, here we go. Here's that amendment. Again, it's not that hard. I mean, my gosh, if it's in Dave's office and we've got one document that's got everything, there's the budget. Have a way to go into the budget and say, this line item here, we're gonna go 10% over because of X. And then, I mean, he does it in a spreadsheet, actually. All this is, this looks like something else, but this is a spreadsheet that generates from the system. Find a way to put that in the system so we can calc it out. I mean, we talked about budgets years ago. Now, this doesn't have it on it, but when we have our budgets, we have what percentage of budget they're at. And that gives you an idea too. How far am I into my budget? My gosh, if I'm 85% into my budget and I'm only 4 months in, I've got a problem. That's the number we need to really focus on, is where we stand in those, on that budget.
but like buildings and grounds, we budget for a certain amount of seasonal people and we're over. You can't, I mean, that's, obviously we need to budget more, cut back on a seasonal next year, but, that's what we planned for, that's what we did. They worked their season and here we are. I can't come to the, first, I guess you could say, hey, we're closing in on our budget for,
Right.
can you see that? Can you foresee that in buildings and ground? So if we're closing in on our budget, at that point, you need to say, hey, Paul, we need to do a budget adjustment for your seasonal guys or get rid of them. But I don't know, you know what I mean, unless I know now.
Well, like I
when
said,
we got this
well,
agenda.
You could do the math right there. Like I said, if you see it at a certain month, I mean, divide the year into 12 and there's your percentages, everything off of that, and say, once you are X amount % over that monthly, we need to talk.
Yeah. Mr. Francis?
Every month, the board gets a 60-page printout of the revenues and expenses for all the funds. The percent that we've spent is in there every time on the far right-hand column.
Right.
But that's as it's paid,
Right.
As it's paid.
not as it's budgeted.
Right.
It's a little more difficult to do that because you don't know what's in the pipeline. But
Like you said,
this is a good exercise for the board to go
that
through.
bill could have been 3 months ago or 4 months ago or 6 months ago, and I get that.
What we're really talking about is the ones that are larger bills that were not anticipated at the
Correct.
budget time. And I think you hold the department head responsible for keeping an eye on that. And I'm a department head, so I have to do the same thing.
Alan, can you speak to your assessing adjustments? Is that something, in the future, if we have something like that? Come on up to, because I don't know how, other than legal, because legal is the only thing that I was aware of that was, a pop-up, I think something that popped up. What's it? Come to the microphone.
I was completely unaware of this number tonight.
Can you talk in the microphone?
Came up, was brought to the board
I was totally unaware of this number that came up tonight. Other than the legal that was brought to the board several months ago in regards to the tribunal, I'm unaware of the other, outside of that. The bill for the legal services were presented several months ago, have not been addressed. Nothing's come back other than the service provider requesting payment be made. So that's all I know right now. I'm unaware of these other additional
Okay.
things.
Thank you, Alan.
Well, as I said the last time I was up here, I think department heads, elected officials, the full-time, should meet monthly and review this. That way, we wouldn't be having these large
Pull
adjustments.
your microphone up, would you? The micro, no, just, there. Couldn't hear you.
That way, we wouldn't be having these large adjustments. So, and you'd know where you're at. But I don't think that has happened.
Ms. Stinevar?
Yeah, I think we've had some excellent ideas I'm happy with. I think that's a great idea that Mr. Manning brought up, and like Mr. Francis said, each time we meet, we get the accounting of, with the bills and how much percentage, so even as trustees, we should be accountable to see what that percentage is, and if it gets up near 90% or whatever, we should be asking people in that department if they are aware that their spending is near 100% of the budget. In light of that, we have to pay the bills, so I'd like to move.
Can
Oh,
we go back to the roads?
no.
Yeah, because like you're saying, like, we have to pay our bills, so we have to approve this. But if this roads section was part of was coming up for the roundabout, but the
Well-
roundabout's in the
Paul explained
budget.
that. Paul explained that.
So is there a bill that's lingering for this 182? Or is he saying, I think we should, I thought that was not an explanation, it was more of a recommendation is how I understood it. That's what I need clarification on.
Paul, Francis, you.
Is that a bill for, like, lingering road work, like
No.
what you were saying? Or is
No.
that just, that would be a nice to have to keep it in there? Because I'm wondering, how did it get here if it's already in the budget, if it's something that we have bills to pay? If that's, I need clarification on that.
Well, perhaps when the budget was prepared, the purchase of that property and other items is considered a capital asset. The budget did not show that when it was prepared. So therefore, I assume that it wasn't budgeted,
Okay. So
plus the
there's,
additional attorney fees. So,
And this isn't necessarily one bill. This is the amount that the finance director sees is needed to keep the budget in that particular fund from going south from now.
fair.
Yeah.
So, but
You can't
but
spend
that
what
amount
you-
has already been budgeted. That's already is built into this budget.
That's what he said. Well, I mean, he's got to move it around for capital improvement, whatever, but what Paul said is there are bills that came in late because of difference in fiscal year between the road commission and the township. So after, when we're into 2020 budget year, they're going to be getting bills from 2019. So you can't pay those unless you do the budget adjustment because it's not in that next budget. You see what I'm saying? But they don't, there's not one necessarily bill of
Wouldn't we want to do that just separately, though? Like, if we're going to do that,
Well,
not,
that's what I was saying. Some
Okay.
of this should be done separately
yeah.
rather than accumulate.
Did you have more you were going to add, Paul?
I don't know what you mean by doing it separately.
Like, not approve this 182, and if there are lingering bills coming in, we do a separate budget adjustment to
Just address that.
Yeah, to address those bills, not, yeah, we'll probably need it, throw it in there. Does that make sense?
If you're asking me, I would have no problem in doing that. We'll probably end up at the same place if those bills come in. We'll have to
Right.
adjust the budget again. But I would have no problem in deleting that for tonight, if that's what you wish to do. David was right, the cost of the roundabout really should be a capital outlay item on a different line. It's included in the $1.5 million number as road maintenance, which are all of our road
Right.
projects. That 175 is in there.
I wasn't aware of that, I'm sorry.
But
Paul.
it shouldn't have been in there, it should have been down as a capital outlay item.
Correct. Therefore, that's why I went with the adjustment.
I understand.
Okay. If I may take it out, I'll take it out.
But if that's the case, it's not an adjustment, it's just a movement, so you'd have an offsetting decrease.
Yeah.
So it's at best a general ledger entry.
I agree.
So
I
do
would
you
like
want
to
me
request that if we're going to have the addition of the 182, that we show the reduction so that the movement of those funds are clear.
I guess if you're gonna change that number, the only one I would move is the 175. I would leave the bump in the legal fees where it is, because I think that is going to be spent.
Okay,
It's just the 175 that we're talking about,
Correct.
or should be talking, not the 182, it's included in that 182.
Yeah. Yep.
so do you want me to come back next meeting with a revised amendment? For the roads?
Well, there's no rush on doing this, right? It would be easier if we had the right number in, otherwise we gotta scratch out the one that's in there on the document we have in our hand. So we could very well delay it till the next meeting, couldn't we? Is there a problem in doing that? Anyone see?
The entire budget adjustments? No, I don't have a problem.
I'm gonna be spending money out of mine, so then we're into, mine didn't get approved in time.
If we put it on the first meeting in January, would you be spending money before then on it?
Possible. I gotta get applications.
Okay.
Because that'd be the
Just-
January 7th.
Just so this board is aware that we may be approving something that I've already spent money out of. That's what I'm trying to avoid, but if the board doesn't care, I'm okay.
Well, if you have money in your budget
I have some,
to
yes.
cover the applications.
Yeah, I'm just not sure what else is gonna trickle in. Just trying to cover, since we're getting reimbursed.
True.
Mr. Supervisor, I would request that we table this. The numbers can be corrected and brought back. And if we need to caveat that Ms. Hirschberger may have an expenditure, I mean, we're all very aware of that, and we know the spirit of what you're doing, so I don't think there's gonna be any pushback.
So are we agreeing to take the $6,500 out of trustees too?
That makes sense.
I agree. I don't think it should.
Put it in
no
legal.
lines there.
Where would you like it put?
Legal fees.
Pardon me?
Legal, it's legal fees. What's wrong with that? Well, I mean, as a finance guy, what do you see that would be an issue?
I don't see it as an issue. When the board wanted this done, I saw it as a board action. Therefore,
But you
I
have
put
it
it
under
in
just
board.
trustees.
Trustees.
Well, I know, but the trustee budget isn't a board budget, but however, every single thing that we approve to spend is a board action.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you use that logic, the fire truck should be listed under trustees. I mean, unless there's a legal reason why it shouldn't, I think that is an expense that needs to be shown to legal.
Do you need to address 8C as well in the tabling of this due to the 25 grand in emergency management preparedness?
Well, I think whatever we do on 8C will correct 6A and 6B, because we'll have an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the 25 will be approving tonight.
Correct.
So we
Yeah.
will be spending it before
Yeah.
it's approved.
Yeah, yeah.
So
that's-
we will get the horse before the cart.
Yeah.
Why
There's
don't
times
we,
that's gonna happen.
why don't we,
And it's not the end of the world. I mean, if we approve a siren tonight, it's an emergency thing for the community to let them know we have a tornado. Sometimes
No,
we
there's
have to
nothing
spend,
wrong- there's
I
nothing
know,
wrong
but
with
I'm
it. We're
saying there's
just
gonna be times
agreeing
we have
that we
to
know
spend
that.
money before we approve it.
Right. The board just needs to agree that.
And the warning siren for the community is one of them.
We are
not
going
talking
to
about
approve
the
the
warning
warning
sign,
sign, the community
I know, but it
before
was
we
just-
spend it. We're not,
I know, but it
did
was
you
just
already
talked about-
have that put it up?
It was just talked about, should we take it off?
No, it's on the agenda to be approved
it's on the
tonight.
agenda.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I
no,
know.
I agree.
But it was just talked about a second ago of
I didn't hear that, sorry.
you could entertain a motion to adopt the recommended budget adjustments tonight and approve it so that we're all legal on all these expenditures we've just been talking about.
I think
And
that'd
then
be
at
more
the next
prudent.
meeting or a future meeting not too far away, adjust that budget. And if we need to downsize the one for roads, do it. If there are others that happen to pop up that we need to change, you make the
But I
change then.
think part of the correction, Paul, some of these, are budgeted for, so that's what needs to be corrected.
You're making a motion.
So was that a motion, TC, to table? Because if it was, I'll,
We can either make that motion, or we can make a motion that we move the 6,500. We approve as presented with the two notations. We move the 6,500 from trustees to legal, and an offsetting $175,000 is moved from, I believe you said, roads
Capital outlay.
to offset the 182. With those two actions, this would then be largely correct, and I think within approval of most of the board tonight.
I'd support
If you want that in a motion, I'll make it that way.
I would support that motion.
Any discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, 6B, approval of a resolution amending the 2019-2020 special funds budget. Mr. Manning?
Fire district fund. We're getting funding for ambulance runs, and when we sent fire department down to Florida. And then the sale of the fire truck, that was an additional $40,000. So revenue is expected to go up $90,000. Life insurance is over budget. I'm estimating another $10,000 here. Medical supplies isn't over budget yet, but it's headed that way. So $10,000 there will bring it up to last fiscal year's actual. Workman's comp was budgeted at 36, we're at 38, so 5,000 budget there. Maintenance, all the maintenance items are presently over budget, and that's going to require additional funding. So we're looking at $111,000 in additional funding for the fire, an additional $90,000 in revenue. Police, no changes. Park, couple minor changes there. Contracted services, additional 10,000. That's for tree removal and cleanup.
So that's an item right there, the 10,000. My
What's that?
park's going over, should that have, they probably come to this board
Before they got the tree
before they
removed,
got the
they
tree
should
removed.
come and ask, they tell us they wanted to remove a tree and give us a
I know
bid.
one of them was an emergency that was leaning in Parmalee Park over the kids' football field for the Civic Center. So I know they had one tree
The
emergency.
second was heavily discounted, connected to the first, which was the reason why there's a second tree that was dealt with from an expedited standpoint.
It was an emergency, the tree.
I just can't imagine that there wasn't money in the budget to remove the tree. I mean, you can move money around within your department, you know, before you have to get a budget adjustment, but, and then make known at the next meeting.
But that's one of those tough things. I mean, you know, the park board say they budget 40 grand for tree removal. Somebody's gonna say, you know what I mean? You're padding the
No.
budget, you know,
No,
I almost,
Because you can move it around within the department. You don't have
yeah,
to,
but I almost like budgeting for what you need, and when things come up, if they're not emergency, you come to the board.
I agree.
That
but
way you're
not after
budgeting.
you've paid the bill.
Right, but what do you do when a tree's gonna fall on a football field? You know what I mean? You have to take care of it. As I say, you can't plan for everything on this board.
Fire equipment fund, excuse me. When the budget was put together, we did not take into consideration loan payments for ambulance and the new fire truck. Legal fees, that was required for the purchase of the ladder truck. Then the DDA,
How do
Could you
we
say
not
that
take
one
it-
more time? I didn't understand. What was the 105? For the fire fund revenue and expense, could you tell me that again, please?
all right, 5,000 for legal fees for the purchase of the ladder truck. Okay?
Mhm.
80,000 for principal on the truck and the ambulance, and 20,000 for interest. So. That totals up to $105,000. Okay?
Moving on.
Well, it's-
You can come back to it.
Okay. Library had decreased a little for contracted services. DDA, community promotion was not budgeted, and we put $7,500 in there. So that's the basic changes in the other funds.
So I guess my question is, the legal, let's leave the legal, how is the $100,000 not budgeted? For a ladder truck that we've had on order for 18-plus months? It's been delivered, I don't even know how long it's been sitting, but I don't understand that.
Yeah,
I don't either, so that makes two of us, sir. Sorry. But it wasn't budgeted at the time the budgets were put together.
come on up. If you got something to add. Yeah, that was my question too. I don't know how we don't budget for that, but.
As far as the fire equipment and the payment for the new fire truck and ambulance, I think that is potentially a misunderstanding or miscommunication. What wasn't budgeted initially was a down payment for the ladder truck. when the budget was developed, we were working with the assumption, Mr. Manning and myself were both working under the assumption, as we have with previous apparatus, that there wasn't going to be a down payment. Until after the budget was approved, we didn't realize the intent of the board was to put a $100,000 down payment on it. So I think it's probably a little misleading to say the payment for the new fire truck and ambulance weren't budgeted. Those things were budgeted. However, the $100,000 down payment, when the board decided to go into that that direction, with a down payment for the ladder truck, it essentially replaced what was budgeted for payments for the fire truck and the ambulance. I think that's probably a little cleaner
That makes
reflection of what happened. When we discussed it after the fact, Mr. Manning and I discussed that, and he agreed that or he indicated that a budget adjustment would have to be made based on the revenue that we're generating and the surplus in the fire district fund that we were carrying at that time and will probably continue to carry. I suspect that down payment is likely to be covered by what we continue to have as revenue that's generated that's going into the fire district fund. So while I understand they're different funds, I don't anticipate, or at least we kind of expect, that there's going to be no pulling from our savings, our unfunded savings to accomplish this and to take care of it.
So by the end of this fiscal year, you're thinking that's a wash, basically?
We suspect, and we suspect, or at least we're hoping, while we can't from month to month predict a deployment revenue or necessarily transport revenue. We're kind of hoping that we're not drawing down our savings any. We're hoping that it does end up being a wash.
Okay.
So Dave, something you had said was that there's 20,000 in interest on the 100,000? I mean, that seems,
That's what the interest payments are.
that's what the interest payments are for the fire truck?
Yes.
20,000 for every 100?
Along with
That
the
doesn't
ambulance.
make sense.
It wouldn't be 20 on 100.
Well, but it's what he said.
And as a
So-
down payment, there wouldn't be interest on a down payment. It's a down payment.
Where's your budget adjustment?
But
He's
You got
adjusting,
talking to the microphone.
well, I guess let him answer.
The interest is based on
Total.
the total amount of the loan.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear with that, because
Okay.
it said
Okay.
20,000 of that was interest out of the
All
100,
right.
so it made it sound like,
No, they're all, it's all separate. Yeah.
any comment, more comments or
So
questions?
80 is the down payment.
Pardon me?
80 is your down payment, not 100, correct?
No,
100 was the down payment.
No, I'm missing something. If there's 100 down payment and 20 interest, that's 120. We're looking at a 105. Is there something I'm missing?
No, numbers line up.
You have your quarterly payments, then you have your quarterly interest payments. Okay? Interest is based on the outstanding amount of the loan. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And as the payments go out, the interest payments will go down, because the balance on the loan goes down. It's like a mortgage on your house.
the $100,000 down payment on that $1.1 million purchase of the ladder truck is included in the capital outlay account, not the bond principal and interest accounts. So the 100,000 down payment is included in a different account, on that same category, in that same
Fund.
fund, if you will.
Right.
It still doesn't add up to me. Is that
So Paul, where's the 105 then? If the
Pardon me?
100 is reflected in the fund, which would be the down payment,
Look on page 9 of this budget adjustment recommendation. That has that department, if you will, in there, that fund. The $105,000 is $5,000 legal fees, $80,000 in principal, and $20,000 in interest. The 80 and the 20 are estimates of what the total bond principal and interest payments will be.
So I feel like we're picking hairs, but you had a $100,000 down payment, or you had a $100,000 payment, which is ultimately 80/20, but let's just, for simple math, call it 100. Somehow, there was an oversight based on communication of whether this board's pleasure was the $100,000 down. And so what the chief has said is that over the course of the year, ultimately, at the end of the fiscal year, that $100,000 will be caught up. But the problem, or the question I have, is it's $100,000. So why are we hearing that it's interest if in fact
Put in last fiscal year.
it's down payment and/or at the very least, it's just a payment?
That's what I was
It's, I'm more concerned that we don't know exactly what it is than the fact that it's $100,000. We all agree it's $100,000 no matter what, that we can't change that. But I'm concerned
That's
that
right there.
there's not really an explanation.
Yeah, when just the term down payment implies not putting anything into interest. A down payment would be principal alone.
Yeah,
That's correct. To me, in my
P&I.
view, when we formed the budget last June, we did not budget enough for principal and interest payments on all the loans. It's not just the one loan. We're still paying on an ambulance or two here or there, plus this brand-new ladder truck. We just under-budgeted principal and interest when we formed the budget.
You look in last fiscal year, there was a $104,000 payment in capital outlay. So that could be where the deposit is on the ladder truck.
Could be.
I think
Well,
my
I don't
concern
know. I'd have to go
is
back and look.
it's a veracity of the numbers. That's the problem, is that we've got a fund balance and the explanation isn't rock solid, and now it's like we're trying to figure out the rationale behind it, and I don't understand that. We have a finance director that handles the numbers. We have a board who either did or did not approve, and we videotaped our budget session, so we can go back and look. I think the takeaway from tonight is that we've got to pay closer attention to the specifics of these budgets and these numbers. I agree with what Nancy's saying. I also agree that you have emergencies that come up, and in my experience on this board, we have had no problem funding emergencies. But as a trustee, I've got to, at a core level, believe when I see numbers that they're legit and reflective of where we are. And I feel like that's a bit of a problem tonight.
I agree with you. We need to be better about it. But also, I mean, I think a lot of us lean on the finance director to, you know what I mean, to kind of communicate adjustments and, hey, these budgets and, you know, so I mean, it's something I think we all definitely could be better about, you know.
I appreciate the fact that from the revenue, it appears that this number is going to offset itself by the end of the year. That's good news. But again, it comes back to the specificity and being able to be sure that these numbers are accurate.
Any more discussion? Comments? Look for a motion.
Mr. Supervisor, I move that we're talking about the entire special revenue funds in total. Is that correct? If that's true, then I would make a motion that we approve the recommended budget adjustments for 2019, 2020 in all the special revenue funds as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion is supported by Ms. Tinneberry. Discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Okay, item 8A, vouchers for payment. Ms. Hirschberger?
3-something.
I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General Fund, $356,909.03. Fire District, $29,607.69. Police Fund, $2,561.65. Park Fund, $2,978.71. Fire Equipment, $15,853.53. Transit System Fund, $19,634. Library Fund, $3,536.87. Downtown Development Authority, $7,408.08. Sewer O&M Fund, $3,241.67. Trust and Agencies Fund, $744, for a grand total of $442,475.23.
I'll support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion?
One item.
Mr. Francis?
Included in the general fund amount of $356,000 is a little over $234,000 in road projects that we're paying. That shows up on page 3 of the report.
Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clement?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 8B, approval of a bid for the renovation, repair of Fire Station 1. Jim Jacobs with Jim Jacobs Architects. If you could kind of go over what we have here.
Yes, good evening, Supervisor and trustees. We prepared a recommendation letter that's before you this evening based on the bids that we received for the renovations of Fire Station number 1. We put those out for bid. They were advertised publicly, and we had, I think it was 13 companies show up at the pre-bid meeting for a period of 3 weeks that was out. We received 7 bids on the bid day, and I believe you have that tabulation of what those look like. Based on those bids, I started working with the lowest 3 to vet them, and in the process, we are recommending a proposal to go forward with Delventhal Group based on acceptance of alternates 2 and 3 and rejection of alternates 1 and 4 for the total that the $701,500.
Comments or questions, Ms. Tinneberry?
The minutes say deduct 1, but they say add 4. You're saying deduct 4 also?
Yes. Yeah, that should be a delete 4
Delete.
or rejection of it. Now, it could be something that comes back, and we would recommend, depending on how the project goes, that is something that was extra scope, it was desired, but with where the budget numbers came in, we're recommending that be rejected at this stage of the game.
So alternate 2 and 3 would add 39.5 possibly to the 662?
That is correct, for a total of 701.5.
7015.
Yep.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the bid, is it a bid? From Delventhal Company, 3796 Rockwood Circle, Millbury, Ohio, as presented, based on the, I see them out there, based on the recommendation from the engineer and their findings.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? I have some discussion. Was this budgeted for, and how are we going to pay for it?
You're in charge of the fire department? Was it budgeted for?
Well,
and are we?
all the trustees are in charge of the fire department, but we're going to finance this, or we're going to pay cash for it out of our general fund budget with our rainy day fund?
I'd say it could come out of your budget.
I'd like to
Well,
comment on
we
that.
just approved, we're about to approve it without budgeting.
No, I appreciate, and I think that should always be brought up, like, especially for large, I mean, spending large amounts of money, having a clue where that money's coming from, and is it budgeted, and
Well, I would ask the
All of that.
clerk and the treasurer, is this, I thought it was in the budget for the improvement of that building, but no?
Well, not all in 1 year. We do not have $700,000 available to spend on this in 1 year. My recommendation, and we've talked about it at the Fire Advisory Board many times, that we should think about financing that over a 4 to 5 year period and then paying it off using the budget amounts that we have covered. That would do it. But it would necessitate borrowing that money up front and then paying for it over 4 or 5 years.
What kind of financing? I mean, through a bank or through what kind of a bond, or what are you talking about?
Probably a
financing?
bank loan. I don't know if we'd want to bond it. It's not that big.
Yeah, but see, the thing is we do have the money.
No, we don't.
We have it we have $1.9 million supposedly for a rainy day fund. This board has all talked about, we can be in the 1.5 range. And there was $2.5 million total, so that leaves an extra $500-something thousand out of that total $2.5 million. I'm just saying the thought should be at least talked about instead of just 4 years of interest.
What fund are you talking about? Fire department,
When we were talking about,
fund balance, or our fund, general fund balance?
when we were talking about the roads and all that, or everything was last meeting or whatever, or no, the millage meeting we had, remember that? When we all got together, we asked, we wanted to know what our total fund balance is. And it was said 2.6 million. And then there was talked about setting 1.9 aside, and then we would have in our fund balance left over outside of rainy day fund, $500,000-600,000.
So the fire department has a fund balance too, so you're talking about taking this out of the general fund balance?
Our general fund.
And if I can comment, I don't think it ought to be spent out of the general fund. I think it ought to be out of the fire department fund.
Right.
So that we have all the costs of operating the fire department in one fund. Now, you can choose to have the general fund contribute to that,
Right.
but we can't, in my opinion, we should not expense it in the general fund as a building. If it's gonna be anything, it ought to be a transfer over there if we need be. But, that can be worked out.
Mr. Clements?
Mr. Francis, in your guess, based on recent loans that you've gotten and conversations, what would you
3.5.
approximate 3.5%?
Probably is a guess.
So 3.5 over 4 years.
4? Did you say 40?
3.5
Over
over
4 years. Okay,
4
I thought you
years
said-
potentially.
So, Mr. Steiner, can you do some quick math?
I can do some math real quick, but
What are you after? The
We have to
interest?
I'm just curious, I
We
mean,
gotta
if we
amortize
have
it, though.
the money, I don't, you say we don't, I'm just saying,
Well,
I would
I
hate
make
to.
that comment about, you were assuming, I was assuming you were talking about paying for it out of the fire fund. We do not have that kind of money in the fire fund.
Oh, I agree with you there.
But you're mixing funds. Now we're talking about general fund. And we do have the money there. It's just, do you wish to put it all in one lump, or?
Well, I mean, something too is you could borrow the money to the fire department, and over time, the fire department fund could pay that back. And that would save them the interest. I'm not saying one way or the other, I'm just saying it should at least be talked about. Bonding's very expensive to do.
My thought on it is, again, we talked about a level of keeping our rainy day fund so that the township is solvent. There are funds there. I have a hard time justifying paying the interest when we're not encroaching on putting the township in any precarious position financially.
The only thing is if we do have 1.9 in our rainy day fund, we're doing our capital improvement plan. I'm not sure how much we'll need for a boost in the capital improvement fund to get that, and that could come out of our rainy day fund,
But
So, I mean, it would be nice to have some extra in there, but, I mean, we do have an extra $500,000-600,000 after the rainy day fund.
But I think when you look 4 years down the road and you look at the cost of the building, the interest on that loan, and what we do on capital improvement versus we self-finance this project and capital improvement, those are very close numbers. That's not a huge spread.
Well, what's the timing we're talking about? This wouldn't all be coming out of this fiscal budget, would it? I mean, it would?
Yeah.
Timing-wise is that pending your approval this evening, we would anticipate contract signing before or right after the first of the year, with construction commencing within 15 days of that. Being
Are you
completed,
talking to the microphone?
oh, sorry, being completed by spring of 2020. 120 days after commencement.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
The decision on financing doesn't have to be made tonight. We've got a lot of variables to work on. We might very well choose to self-fund it. We need to work the numbers. But the decision tonight is, are we approving the bid?
I really like the idea of having it figured out, though.
I agree.
But,
I
like,
just-
just because of the prior conversations we've had this evening. It's like all of the conversations we've had all night you avoid that mess by having this conversation.
Mr. Steiner?
I did just find a quick calculator chart, and it's an internet chart, but that would run us on a 4-year loan, $701,500, and I just threw 3.75 interest in. It's about $15,750 a month, according to that,
Payments.
in payments.
How much interest?
Well, over the term, $55,021 on
Lot
a
of money.
4-year.
All right, could you call the roll, please? I think we're not gonna get anywhere tonight. I think we need to study it, and Mr. Francis, maybe next meeting you could come back with some solutions or some
Options.
Do we-
options
we-
for us.
On the finance,
Yes,
but we've already got a motion and second.
we got a
to
motion and a second to approve
the
it.
bid, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Thank you, appreciate it.
Just tell them to hold off, will you?
Item 8C, approval to purchase one additional community warning siren. Chief? I think everybody knows that the Temperance Fire Station, it's been an issue with the siren going off. One of our past firemen has to manually go up there and manually turn the siren on, so it's always been an issue. Well, it's broke now, and I'm glad it's broke. 'Cause I don't want to rely on anybody going up there in a storm to warn the people, so.
Yeah, as presented in the letter to the board, in the memo to the board, this hadn't been something that was pressing. We had been, we had contacted the county to see if there was any grant funding, to see if there was any emergency management funds. So we hadn't moved or brought this forward to you until the siren failed. It was going to be costly to repair, at which point that's why you're seeing, or I contacted Mr. Manning and said we're going to likely be looking for a budget adjustment in the emergency preparedness fund, as well as bringing this to the board so that we can get moving on this project and get a functional siren up in the Temperance area. So previous to this, we had been relying on that siren that did not have the capability and was not tied into the county system. So all of the areas in the township and all of the sirens in the township are set off by Monroe Central Dispatch when there's a weather warning, save for generally downtown Temperance. And we were having to rely on someone to go there in a weather emergency and manually activate it. Clearly, that's not the preferred method. Clearly, in a weather emergency or something like that, it's important to get as early of notice to the residents as possible. So we feel it's prudent to go ahead with this. Discussion was had about the potential to move it to Car Park. They think that that would give us a little better coverage, as well as serve the community a little better to have it at the park as opposed to at the fire station. 15, 20, 30 years from now, if the fire station's repurposed, if the dynamics change, and for some reason the board would want to sell that property, we'd end up moving a new siren and incurring that cost. So the recommendation of West Shore was potentially to to have it relocated to a park that would serve two purposes. It would get it onto that park property and provide a little better coverage.
Any comments, questions for Chief, Ms. Tenderray?
Is there no real, responsibility for the county to, place this?
My understanding is, although it was before my time, my understanding was that the original equipment was purchased. There may have been some kind of a grant where the equipment was purchased and then given to each township. So much like the grant for the new fire radios that we're getting, that comes through a county grant, but then we're responsible for the upkeep, the maintenance, and things like that moving forward when they're issued, the new radios are issued to us. So to the best of my knowledge and best of my understanding, at some point years ago, the maintenance, the upkeep, and everything was given out to each municipality, which is when also that emergency preparedness budget was created for the township, and that about $10,000 a year is set aside in the emergency preparedness budget for the upkeep, the maintenance, and things like that of those sirens. But this is kind of an outlier because this is a holdover from the days where the fire sirens were used in Temperance and Lambertville as such.
So when you say it is your understanding, where did you acquire that understanding?
That was in conversations with the emergency manager.
Okay,
So,
all right.
like I said, we contacted him to see if there was more grant funding or if perhaps there was county funding that was available.
And I talked to
unfortunately,
county
there was not.
commissioners about partnering with us on it too, and that was unsuccessful.
Why is there not multiple bids for this?
West Shore has the entire project. We could try to solicit some more bids, but West Shore handles the county and the entire siren system. So
That's fortunate.
So to be able to
Yeah.
tie it into the county system and the updating and the maintenance, I think that.
Is that why they're able to charge $6,000 for annual inspections?
Of the 17 sirens, I mean, they're up and down in the 17 sirens, so I suppose that we could try to go out and find another company. I'm aware of another company in the area that services both the brand that we're using or the brand that we're given.
I was I guess more so asking, like just I thought for any job like this, I thought, think it would have to be, that it has to be bid. I just don't,
think we're
that's, I'm
tied into
more
this.
asking
I would
here.
have to look back, but I think we're tied into them and to their maintenance. And I think not this board, but boards previous approved that. And it was like 10 years, I'm thinking.
As he said, it came from the county
Right.
originally, and all townships are linked with this.
So they'll pay for it?
No, no, but I know Ida had a problem with the
Unfunded mandate.
intermittent siren, and this is what they had to. That's why I want to make sure he got his information from the emergency guy, because,
I don't think it's on you. I just think $20,000 is a lot of money for a siren, and $6,000 is a lot to inspect one.
Not one,
No,
17 of them,
17 of them.
which that's still,
I'd still say that's high.
what all they do for the inspection? They climb up there, obviously.
Turn them on.
It's a process of going out, activating them, making sure that they're linked up. I would not want to claim to be a siren expert as to the ins and outs and the details of them, but annually they're out, they visit each site, they access them, they ensure that they're tied into the system, they ensure that they're functional and operating, and make sure that they're going to activate when there's an emergency. It may be
Probably have their iPhone.
oversimplifying
Probably
it,
have
but.
to climb up there.
And they have ears. Their ears
Okay.
work.
I look for a motion.
is it in the budget?
Yes.
Just kidding. Move that we approve the bid from West Shore Services in the amount of $21,800 for the replacement of the emergency siren in Temperance, moving it to Carr Park.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion?
The pictures that were included in the packet, what's the purpose of the picture? That's where it's gonna go.
That's a good
with the
question.
car park?
That's the poll they'll go on.
Not aware of any pictures. I didn't submit any pictures as part of the,
There's two pictures with it. Kind of goofy pictures, too.
that, I don't
Take a
believe that was.
close-up of you,
One of
chief.
the groundwater. Don't put it in the puddle of water.
I'm not sure. That wasn't part of the information I had submitted, so I'm not sure.
Somebody clipped it to their pictures.
Could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tindemary?
Oh, here, present, aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
No.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 6-1. Item 8D, approval of the 2020 poverty guidelines. 2020 poverty exemption policy guidelines, application review process, income and asset test guidelines, and the application. Mr. Matlow, thanks for being here.
Tonight I'm here in regards to the poverty exemption requirements that are needed to be voted on by the board. In the past, it was just a primarily one-sheet documentation, but over the years, that has developed into a packet. This was the same packet that we reviewed last December. Modifications were made, and it was approved in January of this year. This is brought to the board again because this is an annual event or requirement. The only changes that have taken place to this application are the dates from 2019 to 2020. The dollar amounts that have changed in there are reflected from the federal poverty guidelines that we have to make the adjustments for. With that said, that is the packet. There's a second request, Mrs. Tinneberry brought up last year as far as assets. At that time, the board established $25,000. We had reduced that from a higher number. She requested that I keep my eye on it and reviewed that a little further, and I agreed with her. There have been some major changes, and I'm recommending that we drop that or lower that to $15,000, which is in line with what the state is using from the Department of Human Health and Services, I believe. And that's where we're at with this. I wish it was back to the one form, but it's not. And it is also a requirement for the AMAR, so when they come in, they can say, oh, you have everything correctly documented.
Comments or questions for Mr. Matlow?
So with this first one, we're just approving the 2020 poverty exemption policy and guidelines as stated on page 2.
Correct. That's everything. The second approval is to change that 25 to 15. I wanted to bring that to the board's attention before I made that change of what was already established earlier in the year.
I would move that we, thank you for this as well. I would move that we approve the 2020 poverty exemption policy and guidelines as shown on page 2 of the packet.
Second.
Okay, motion in support of Mr. Steiner. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 8E, approval to adjust the 2020 poverty assessed asset limits.
I move that we approve the 2020 poverty asset limits at $15,000 as it matches the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services posted asset limits.
Second.
Okay, motion in support of Mr. Steiner. Discussion?
Will that need a change on the resolution that's in the packet? Because the resolution in the packet shows 25.
Those will all be adjusted to that 15,000.
Okay.
Yes.
Could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Just one more step. Mr. Francis was right in regards to the budgeting. We will be glad to participate in any way to help streamline this. There are emergencies that do come up that are totally unforeseen. at the time we're doing our budget, everybody on this board that I've seen over the years worked very hard and done their due diligence. There's things that we just do not foresee, and we don't want to bring anything above to the board that's total shocker. So we'll be glad to work with you any way we can.
I totally agree, but when you see the emergency, that's when it needs to come to the board, not when it's time to pay for it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, item 8F, approval of the 2019 senior citizen tax penalty waiver resolution. Mr. Francis?
Excuse me, this is something that we've done every year that I'm aware of for a long time, and it, in effect, allows the board to grant a waiver for late penalties for senior citizens, for paraplegics, quadriplegics, eligible servicemen and women, eligible veterans, eligible widows, and totally and permanently disabled persons, blind persons, and those, all the persons that are stated in the resolution that's in your packet, item number 2. And if there are no questions to that, I would make a motion that we approve this resolution as presented.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported by Ms. Tinneberry. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 8G, approval of a resolution to establish the 2020 sewer use charges. Mr. Francis?
Okay. In your packet is a several multi-page document explaining what this calculation is. This is something that's done every year. In the first paragraph, this is based on information received from our auditors, from the Drain Commission in their projections of expenses budgeted for the operation of the sewer plant, and it's up to this board to set the rates that'll cover those expenses, and that's what this is an attempt to do. The first paragraph, for operating and maintenance, the rate actually, I'm recommending a decrease from $5.48 to $5.29 per 1,000 gallons of usage. The decrease. The depreciation change should be increased from $4.67 to $5.22 per residential equivalent per quarter. In the next paragraph, it's the charges for the debt service on the existing and future loans needs to be increased from $28.91 to $30.48 per residential equivalent per quarter. The next paragraph indicates there's a Schedule A that's in the packet that compares the rates for the 3 years, 2018, 2019, and 2020. That's the second page that you can see. And in fact, maybe you'd want to turn to that second page where it shows the chart showing the sewer disposal monthly rate consists of 3 items: operation and maintenance, depreciation and debt service, and the amounts shown. Then there's an average quarterly residential bill based on a household of 3 individuals using 20,000 gallons per quarter. And you'll see that the actual total goes down by 1.18%, a decrease. And the reason that is the operation and maintenance, although the costs went up in total, the number of units being serviced increased. So the rate per went down a little bit, and that's where the big savings is in this formula. So we just went through the first page of the numbers. The second page shows the calculations that support those numbers. And the remainder of it is the resolution to put that all into effect. So does anybody have any comments or questions on it?
I do.
Fire away.
Do you feel comfortable with the capital improvement plan with this program we have here? So in 25 more years, when the scrubbers and everything needs to be upgraded again, at another $20 million, we're funded for it, for the sewer plant.
You're talking the next plant.
The next plant, we need to fund it now. I mean, it's kind of what we're doing with the CIP plan now. And that plan was in place, it was just nowhere near what we needed. I think we had $1.5 million or something funded. We needed 20. So I think I strongly encourage this board to do our due diligence now. And in 25, 30 years, we set up the next group of on here to where we don't have to do millages and major increases. We're funded. I just don't know what that would look like.
It would probably double the charges that we have to make. If you're trying to raise $25 million,
Over the course of 30 years.
well,
I'm just saying it needs to be looked at.
oh, I agree, it needs to be looked at. I believe the land that we're suggesting the next one go in has already been purchased by our funds. It's right across the street from the existing plant on Lavoy Road.
That's planned out great. It's already got a 90 going to the property.
Correct.
They're ready to go there, but still gonna need, who knows in 25 years how much you're gonna need for a new plant. I mean, you're talking $100 million for a new plant. I'm just saying, in 25, 30 years, something needs to be there. If you're talking a new plant, or even if you're talking maintenance, a major maintenance overhaul, I mean, you need to have, I mean, are they talking a new plant in the next 30, 40 years? Is that part of the plan?
I believe so, yes.
Well,
But I don't know if you need to pre-fund it. We always have a debt service charge built into the fund to pay for it as it goes. When we get done with the debts that are incurred right now for this new plant renovations of $24 million, that's figured into this number. When we get to the end of those loans, the new plant will be needed, and then you have new loans for that new plant, and you let them pay as you go,
So-
rather than pre-fund it.
So-
Because if you pre-fund it, you'd have to almost double the amount that we're paying now, so we'd have the cash in the bank in 25 years. And I just don't see that's,
well, kind of too, the people that are paying for the sewer rates now would potentially be funding something that they're not even gonna use.
possibly.
I guess
That's
that's what you're
correct,
saying
right.
too.
Paul and
Yes.
Yeah,
Not my
you-
plan.
we're not gonna be here in 25 years.
Won't affect us.
I'm
but
not
it
willing to
will affect
double
our
my-
kids.
Yeah,
I will, let's do it.
Gonna be tough to generate a lot of support for that proposal.
yeah.
It would.
But keep in mind, if they do have to build another plant in 30 years, and it's gonna cost, I can't imagine what a new plant would cost in 25, 30 years of what we have. I mean, you're talking huge money. So the rates at that point, maybe even if we did something to put something in place, even $10 million in 30 years, you know. But-
We'd be in a better position to put a fence around that, or a ring around that number when we get a year or two into the new operation in the new renovated plant. I think that's the time to be thinking then. It would be just a shot in the dark at this point. But in a couple of years down the road, when the operation and maintenance costs of the renovated plant have some history, we can project based on that. So it's a little premature to me, in my idea, to fund the next plant now. Let's see where we are first. I think it'll end up being about where we are now. We'll have some debt service in there, but it'll replace the debt services in there now. Might be a bigger number, but we'll be able to project that when we have a little history.
Any more comments or thoughts? We have a motion and support, right?
Not yet.
No,
Not yet.
No.
I'd like to make the motion, though,
Oh.
in the written part, the last 3 or 4 pages. If I can get my finger to work. It's a resolution to establish the sewer use charge for the year 2020 for the Bedford Township sanitary sewer system, and I move that we approve that resolution as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 8H, approval for funds to replace the damaged sheriff's vehicle. This is another one of the things that kind of pop up that you don't really plan for. This vehicle was totaled a couple weeks ago. The replacement cost of the vehicle is $32,626. We don't have vehicle replacement coverage for the sheriff's department. We only have it for the fire department. So that's why we weren't fully covered here. So we're gonna get $22,000 from the insurance company. In the next couple weeks, our window ends to be able to order another sheriff's vehicle for it to get here in March. There was another vehicle that an officer struck a deer. That's got about $8,000 worth of damage. That's being fixed, but that's one of the vehicles with the higher miles that we were gonna hand down. The vehicle that was totaled, okay, was the vehicle we were keeping of the four. So what I'm saying is we'll have 3 new vehicles if we don't do anything, and a vehicle that gets fixed with a bunch of miles on it. So I'm proposing we order a 4th vehicle, okay, and then the ones we hand down to either fire department assessing or ordinance, those would be the ones with around 100,000 miles on them. Go ahead.
Have we looked at whether we should add replacement to those vehicles, or can we on our insurance? Have we looked at that number to see?
They won't cover it.
They won't do that.
They just simply won't cover it. Okay.
Here's the issue. Okay, we're getting $22,000. We budgeted, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, we budgeted 120 or 140?
120.
120. Okay, so we have $142,000. We have 4 vehicles at $32,626. They don't know if the equipment will fit in these new vehicles.
You're talking about a similar vehicle, because I was gonna ask that
So
question.
that's you're talking $40,000 more dollars, if that's the case. Can't really plan for it. We can budget for it, and if it does, if it works, it works. But the vehicle that was totaled, Herkimer's is looking at the equipment. If anything's damaged, the insurance company will give us money for that. I'm sure some of the light bars will be able to be used. I'm sure some of the computer equipment will be able to be used. Our cost won't probably be, $10,000, but it could be up there if the cage and stuff isn't transferable, and they don't know yet. They're looking into it. So
What year's that vehicle that was totaled?
the year, I think it was in 18.
Yeah, that or 17, I forget.
It was a newer vehicle. Only
Okay,
had
so,
60,000
and you're
miles on it.
talking about replacing with a
It was
20,
18.
Yes,
Yeah.
and both Explorers.
we are going to have 4 new vehicles in March. If we
Right, but I'm
approve
just
this.
going back to the replacing of the equipment. I mean, unless something is totaled in the equipment.
Well, if the
seems like you
equipment's trashed, they're going to give us all new equipment.
Right, that's what I'm saying, but it sounds like, I mean, like you said, you didn't trash the light bars, and, the cage is
Well,
probably.
we hope that stuff can be replaced to it. It sounds like they've changed the vehicle a decent amount. I asked them to look into getting 19s, something that we know would fit it, and they can't. They're gone. There is none available. So that's kind of where we're at. We have money budgeted for the 4 vehicles to buy them with the replacement cost, but we don't have the money budgeted to replace all the equipment in all 4 vehicles if we have to. Ms. Finberry?
Okay, when you say they, who are they? I mean, are you saying that the sheriff's department asked us to buy new vehicles that didn't fit the equipment from the old vehicles, so we would have had to replace all of that anyway?
Maybe. We don't know.
Who's they?
Well, Sergeant Pauley's looking into it. I mean, he's he's been our go-to guy that does the purchasing through my deal.
It would be Ford that makes the changes on the vehicles.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't-
It's Ford, and then it's the manufacturer of all the internal equipment.
Right.
And when they manufactured what's sitting in our vehicles, is it adjustable? Or is it year, make, model specific? And if it is, then you can't, or it's often not cost effective to try to refabricate it to put it into another vehicle. It's just less expensive to buy a new one. But the question is until, I don't know that those specs are known, or obviously people need to get them. Somebody somewhere knows if the 1920 vehicles have the same specs currently out there, but just, obviously, we don't know tonight.
Ms. Stanbury?
It doesn't seem responsible to me to have the sheriff's department buy vehicles that, that wouldn't fit the new or the old equipment. I think, your memo says totaled out. I was alarmed when I saw totaled out. Could you explain to the public what happened to this vehicle? Because my first reaction was, why are we buying a vehicle that some sheriff's deputy totaled out? But if you,
It wasn't the sheriff's deputy's
I know,
fault.
explain
Somebody
that to
ran a stop sign at Jackman and Samaria.
another person
Another person's
ran
fault. They were
into
at
them
fault.
and totaled it.
Correct.
Okay, that's only fair because like I said, I think that the public deserves to know that they didn't total it out, that someone hit them, and as you said, that's one of those unexpected things. Okay, so you're saying that the four vehicles at 32,000 something comes up to about 130,000 plus, and we have that money in the budget? Is that what you're saying? Mr.
It's
Superintendent?
$130,504 for all four vehicles. We have $142,000 budgeted. If we
Okay.
don't have to replace all the equipment, we're under budget 10,000. If we do, we're gonna have to come back for $30,000 budget adjustment.
So the sheriff's department wouldn't come and help us supply the computer and stuff that needs to go in there?
Well, the computers are probably gonna be transferable. We just don't know about
Whatever is
everything
it.
else.
Okay.
You know
They're
what I
not
mean?
willing to step up with anything, is that it?
You wanna call them and talk to them about it?
Yeah, I doubt that they'd talk to me. My other question is, how do we get a one-year-old vehicle? This is 2019. You're saying this is a 2018 vehicle with 100 and some, how many?
They
They
put
can't-
45,000 a year on these cars.
Driving around Bedford Township?
Well, they don't just drive in Bedford
Yeah,
Township.
well, that's the
It's-
problem.
it's
That's
80
why I think
it's
the sheriff should pop up
80/20, so I
something.
mean, they're going in other communities, they're going up to the county. That's a lot of miles, I mean, but that's
It's a
what they
lot of
put on.
miles, but if they're driving all over the county, then the county should help pay for it. That's just my opinion.
Any more thoughts?
I realize you're covering the maximum number, but I don't think the number's gonna be that high when you start looking at what, I mean, obviously light bars are reusable computers. The things you're talking about are really the center console and the cage. Those are the two pieces that are the question. And 4 cages and 4 center consoles do not cost $30,000.
You got the wraps. I mean, there's a number of things that goes into it. I mean, we don't know the light bar is gonna be. I would think it would be, but if it's the changes that they're thinking with these vehicles, then
So can we table this tonight and is there an urgency to this?
yes. Because if we don't order that fourth vehicle, we miss the window, and then we got a 4-year-old vehicle that you're gonna put another 45,000 miles on it after March. And then now the ordinance department or whoever's gonna get a junk vehicle. So I recommend we order it, get the 4 vehicles. Either way, I mean, they looked into ordering the older models, so they know they would transfer, but they're out. They're not available. I mean, it's not their fault. So I mean, either way, we are going to have to replace equipment possibly. I can talk to them about a partnership, and I mean,
You'd get farther than I would.
Paul,
Ms. Hirschberger?
is it possible that we could approve purchasing this other vehicle and then come back when we know the price and what we're gonna do at that point?
Yeah, I mean, for the equipment, I don't even think we should be really discussing the equipment at this point until we find out
Right.
exactly what it is. and
That's
what
I'm
we'll
thinking. We
need,
could
and then
just approve.
we'll have to have Dave come back and do a budget adjustment and approve the amount.
I got a question.
Mr. Francis?
The three that we ordered before are 2019 models or 2020 models? Compared to the one you're talking about now? Didn't you say the 19s were already
They'll-
sold out under the
They'll
bid?
all be 2020
They'll all
vehicles,
be 2020.
all of them.
Right, so they're just going to manufacture now.
So it's the same unit we just bought three of?
Correct,
Going to buy another one?
correct. We were planning on 3 6 months ago. The fourth one popped up. So,
And we can still get that huge discount if we order it with the other three at this point. But he needs to know ASAP.
If you go into
or
the
we'll
next year,
lose
you've
that.
got a minimum of a few grand easily increase it off the bat if we wait until the next year.
Right, he's actually asking me to let him know tomorrow what this board decides, so he can get that order placed.
okay, I look for a motion.
Mr. Supervisor, I move that we approve your recommendation to purchase the fourth 2020,
Police vehicle.
Police
it's
interceptor.
a police vehicle, but it's, you know, an interceptor or whatever the name of it is, which is the same as the three that we purchased earlier.
I'll support.
Okay, motion and support by Mr. Clemmons, discussion? Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemmons?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Number 9, comments from the public. Comments limited to 5 minutes. Come on up.
Good evening, Logan Tisdale, 1308 Brandywine Street. You spent a lot of time talking about money and budgets. I'm not sure what statistics I can give this board that's going to get this board aroused about the money that we spend for the Monroe County Sheriff's Department and the very little performance that we see out of that. If traffic tickets cost us over $11,000 for one traffic ticket over a 3-month period, that's pretty sad. $70,000 for 1,634 hours on patrol to write 6 tickets certainly would cause me a lot of problems and has caused me problems, plus the 159 accidents that took place during those 3 months. That's one of the reasons why I'm running for sheriff. You're not going to see this activity if I'm the sheriff. And it's not about writing tickets, it's about protecting people's lives. Can't go 500 accidents every year in Monroe County and Bedford Township and think that that's acceptable. It's not. It's not about generating money. It's about taking enforcement action for people who think they can drive with impunity and drive any way they like and not have to worry about getting enforcement action. That doesn't save lives. That's why Monroe County's in the top 10 every year in fatalities for the last couple of years. That's not acceptable. These kind of numbers are not acceptable anywhere, to anybody. When I did the first 3 months, it actually made me sick to see these numbers. I know what good police enforcement looks like. This is not it. Good news for you folks, I'm going to be missing a lot of township meetings because I'm going to be going to other townships, so that should make your New Year's a little bit happier. Secondly, I'd like to say that I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I think sometimes we take Christmas for granted. All the stuff that's going on in Washington is a distraction to really what's important in life. Those things will pass away, but Christmas will never pass away. I want you to remember when you're sitting at home by the fire roasting chestnuts, saying the 12 days of Christmas, that you remember that there are people out there, tens of thousands of people that won't be home for Christmas. I spent 2.5 years in Germany, in Berlin. I didn't go home for 2 Christmases. And I remember how that felt. And I remember working the road when I was a trooper and stuff, the Christmases I worked and stuff, and what that meant to be away from home. While everybody else was home enjoying Christmas, I was out there working. Think about the firemen, the first responders, the police officers, the Coast Guard people, the Border Patrol people. Think of all these people that are serving us, being away from home, that we take for granted. Sometimes we can sit at home and kind of enjoy being with our families. Just think about being on New Year's Eve and stuff when you're home with your family. Just think about that police officer that's out there at 4 o'clock in the morning, those bars close, and he's hoping that the guy that the New Year isn't celebrated by being in the morgue. And the bottom line is that happens all the time. Christmas is about remembering things that are important to us. I want to share with you a few minutes here, just a second, about what a sixth grader told me one time of what she thought was important and how she thought she was important. I was at a grandparents' day at Toledo Christian when I was working there. And there were all these grandparents there, and there's all these kids there, K through 6. I asked the question, I says, how do you know you have value as a person? A little 6-year-old girl jumped out of the seat, looked like she was catapulted out of there. She had her hands waving in the air, going crazy. Then a bunch of other kids raised their hand. And so I said to the little girl, I said, since you were the first one to stand up, I said, you tell me why you think you have value as a person. What do you think she said? She said, because Christ died for me. I know theologians that haven't figured that out yet. 6-year-old girl figured out that Christmas was about God coming to earth 33 years later, giving his life as a sacrifice so that you have value. That's why I was a police officer, because people have value. That's why I'm emotional about these things, because people have value. We forget that people have value. I was bought with a price, and it wasn't silver and gold. It was the blood of Jesus Christ. And if we look at each other that way, maybe we'll treat each other better. Maybe we'll drive better. Maybe we'll flip each other off when somebody passes us. Maybe somebody will be courteous enough not to cut you off. Those are the things that make me think that it's important to be a police officer and to be the sheriff of this county. That's why I think, because people have value. That little girl figured it out at 6-year-old. Maybe some of us adults ought to figure it out, that we have value and we start treating people better. Maybe we live in a better society. Maybe we treat each other better. Maybe we wouldn't have to worry about having police officers around all the time. So I just pray that you have a good Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I thank you for the board for listening to me for this whole year. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? You timed that pretty good. Okay, seeing none, moving on to comments from township board members. Mr. Clements?
Yes, sir, Mr. Supervisor. Mr. Francis, when you come back with an analysis as it relates to bonding or financing, could you try to also include a comparison to us self-financing?
Sure.
If that's reasonably possible. Other than that, I just want to wish all of you a very Merry Christmas. It has been a good year working with you guys. We catch flack from time to time on our decisions, but I do leave these meetings most of the time appreciative of all the hard work and the thought that everybody brings to it. So I wanted to say thank you, and also to everyone who watches, thank you, and I hope you have a very Merry Christmas.
Okay, Mr. Matra?
I'll just say thank you to the Save Our Seniors program volunteers. I think that's a really cool thing. I know a couple of those guys that were recognized tonight, and some other guys that were on that list that weren't here tonight. And it's a solid group of people, and it's there needs to be more of that. And I think there's more needs out there for groups of people like that, and those are the people that make a difference. And then Merry Christmas.
Ms. Tinbury?
I too just want to say, not just, because to me that's one of the most important things of this meeting, but to say thank you to the volunteers that serve on the Save Our Seniors group. I appreciate that very much. Me being a senior, I think it's wonderful that other people reach out and help and take care of those that that need that help. And also the ordinance department for coming up with that community spirit and bringing those people together. I appreciate that.
Mr. Steiner?
I just want to step back one thing on business-wise. When we talked about the fire truck and the down payment and the interest amount, that $20,000 number just threw me for interest. And I did, as I said earlier, I found a amortization chart, just a quick one. It's not going to be exact, but I did $1.3 million for a purchase price. And even at that, at 3.75%, the first month payment would be a little over $13,000 a month. The first payment would only be $4,200.19 in $4,219 in interest. That 20,000 number just was blowing my mind. So we really need to look into that equation and that budget adjustment. Other than that, I've said it before and I'll say it again because this is our last meeting for 2019. Everybody have a safe and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And I would say, as we have some emergency personnel in the audience still, let's make their lives easier and hopefully they can be home more on Christmas and the holidays and not have to be out on the roads. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Francis?
Nothing to add other than that has already been said, other than I know everyone has received their tax bill by now, or they should. And I'm sorry for that, but that's what we're required to do. If you need to deduct that amount by the end of the year, you need to pay it by the end of the year. And we have office hours, and we'll be open. We also have a drop box. You can pay them online. So give us a call if you need some help, and we'll assist you in any way that we possibly can.
Ms. Hirschberger?
I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I just want to thank our paramedics and the Sheriff's Department for all they did for my family a couple weeks ago.
Mr. Francis, one thing I would add to what you just said would be a lot of people still have questions about the Bedford debt, the new millage. You want to go ahead, you can explain it.
Well, we were a little space limited on the explanation on the tax bill. There was a change that was voted on a year ago. It was a school bond issue. It was 1.99 mils that was voted on a year ago, took effect with the December 2019 tax bills. It showed up, and it was called Bedford debt. It should have stated Bedford school debt. It would have answered a lot of people's questions. We're a little bit of space limited on how much we can put in there for a descript, but we needed to work harder on that and missed it.
I think there was a lot of good conversation tonight with budgeting, and I need to be more diligent on my end, working with Dave to make sure we're clear on things. I've leaned on that a lot in the past, and I got to start doing more myself. But this board, from the time that I've been here, every dime we spend serves the public in a certain capacity. I feel comfortable with every purchase that I've ever made here. It's never a want, it's needs, things we have to have. Sirens and fire trucks, and it's all benefits the community. It's just how we go about it. And there's times that it is difficult, but I think we can all be better. So I appreciate it being brought up tonight. Quick update on the Michigan Tavern. We've run into a few issues with retiring service for gas and electric. There is gas on the site. So we're looking into that hopefully being done tomorrow. So he is going to start ASAP. And I'm trying to push it along as quick as I can. I don't know if some people have drove by. There's graffiti on the building now. There's been couches dumped off there. So I can't wait for it to be down. So it'll probably be down, I would think, in the next 2 weeks, week and a half. So please don't dump anything there. Real quick, this board has always been big on partnerships with the schools. Obviously, we do the liaison officer. We've partnered with the different initiatives like the sidewalk to go to the library. One thing that's been frustrating for me is salt. We have to drive almost 45 minutes to get salt with an old dump truck. We go through about 50 tons a year, and the school goes through about 100 tons a year. So we're not spending any money, but we're going to partner with the schools and salt. And if the board doesn't have an objection, we would keep one of our pieces of equipment over there in their bus depot inside their building for the year, and they're going to build a salt mill out of the blocks, and then they're going to put a roof over it, and then we'll purchase the salt through the My Deal, because right now they're paying top dollar for the salt. So that's a partnership. It's not gonna, like I said, it's not gonna cost us any money. It'll save us money because now Pat's not having to drive an old dump truck 45 minutes one way to get salt. So if nobody has any objections to it, I'll move forward, but there's no funds gonna be moved. We are taking some of the blocks that we acquired when we had the leaf and grass drop-off station out back. We're taking those blocks over to the school bus garage, and we're gonna leave, we have two pieces of equipment, backhoe, and then we have that new piece of equipment that we use. It's like a little, I don't know, it's not a skidster, but like a little multi-piece of equipment, so.
Excuse me, you just said, I'm totally into partnering. I think that's a great idea, but how do you determine, is this salt for where we salt the subdivision roads and that? Is that
No,
the kind of
we
salt?
don't salt the subdivision roads.
Okay, well, what is
Just
it?
for our properties.
Okay, so it's just salt for the cemeteries and the township buildings and that?
Correct.
Library?
Ivor
whatever.
Lindsay,
So, and we're buying the same amount that we would normally buy this 45 minutes away?
correct.
And we're, the school's billing us, and we're paying the school?
No, we will be doing it. They're not gonna do 150 ton over there at one time. Basically, whatever we use is what we'll, as far as who pays for what, we'll have to work it out, but we're gonna keep track of what we're using throughout the year, and so are they.
Okay, well, I, as a trustee, I'd just like to know what that is at some point in
Yeah.
time.
I'll keep you up to date with it. It's kind of, we're trying to throw it together, we just worked out with their new maintenance guy and the school superintendent, Dr. Carl, and Pat and myself, because they closed down the one plant. I think it was in DC, where's is in Petersburg, I think. They closed one of the plants, so we kind of had to, with the whole MDOT, I think MDOT took it over or something, so we kind of had to
No,
do something.
you mean the road commission property on Summerfield?
Not the one off M151 right there,
No, not M151.
up north in Petersburg.
Oh, Dundee.
For
had
some
it.
reason, we're not allowed to use that one, because that would be real nice if we could just go there, a mile down the road.
Real quick to that. We should have some kind of basic agreement if we're gonna have a piece of equipment stored on their property, protect them, protect us. We need some kind of basic agreement and liability. Shouldn't take something drastic, but we should just have something in writing before we want to do that. And then,
Trudy, is that something we can do without Phil, or is that, you want Phil, you want to, do you know
Yeah, we can put together a simple intergovernmental agreement to carry that, to
now
cover
it's going
those
to cost some
issues.
money.
well, we'll save that in his first 45-minute run.
Okay.
You know from your youth that there's vandalism that can happen on school properties.
They'll be keeping it indoors, so it'll be indoors.
Yeah.
From my youth, Nancy, Paul, can you talk a little bit, you know a little bit more about what's going on in the community with we got a SAW grant. Everybody knows we got this grant last year to test all of our pipes within the community, find leaks, and then ultimately fix them. They're doing that right now. We're getting a decent amount of calls. Basically, the trucks are going around right now. They're testing the sections of pipe. They're sticking like a balloon type substance in them, and then they drain it and they leave it in there. It fixes the leak. Am I kind of hitting it?
Correct.
Pretty correct, but just so people know, be patient. They have their equipment. Some of these roads are kind of narrow and they're blocking off the whole road, and it is an issue. I think they are letting people know the best they can when they're going to be there. But that's what's going on. That's part of the SAW grant. So.
And it's repairing a 50-year-old system, in effect.
You want to give a 30-minute explanation on what I asked you about?
30 minutes?
Why we're, 30 seconds.
Okay.
Why we have railroad ties filling up switches, boy, it's getting late, ditches and swales in front of properties? The Consumers Energy Project with new poles?
Oh, for ITC? Yeah, they're switching out the poles from the old wood poles to a single monopole system. And some of these properties, they're going through people's properties, cutting a lot of trees down, because we are getting calls that, they do have the right. If you have blue spruces, and we had somebody call, they had 30 blue spruces that they've had there for 20 years underneath the lines. They cut every single one of them down. Totally tore up their property, was sad, but I tried to stop it and I couldn't. So, I mean, if you plant a tree within that right of way under those lines, I don't care if it's 500 apple trees, they'll cut them down if they want. So just know that if you live within the lines, but they are replacing those. Mr. Francis?
I think the railroad ties are there to support the vehicles,
The crane.
so they don't sink down into
Right.
the, into
That's
the
what it
side.
is. Because,
the crane.
well, like I said, when I first called Paul, asked what he knew about it, it just looked like a guy on Stearns Road was plugging up his front yard and ditch with railroad ties. It just,
I don't know what that is on Stearns Road. That's
No,
not
it's-
with ITC. I don't think
so,
it is.
because the same format I've seen all the way down Stearns Road.
Okay, because this one is going all through like just north of the Erie.
Oh, if you go all the way down Stearns Road to the east, they're all lined up all the way to Telegraph.
It probably could be. But yeah, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and thank you to all the volunteers that we have. Really, I mean, we were able to do so much with like Blizzard Fest. That's all volunteers for this community. There's anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 people that came into downtown Temperance and had a great time at this Christmas festival. I want to thank Jewel Patton, Tasha Harris, and Lexi Rapp. You guys are awesome. They worked hard all year long on this, raised almost $24,000 for the event, and the community had a great time. So other than that, one more thing?
One thing I forgot to mention, and it's to,
That's actually three things that you brought up. So.
I think we as a board need to express our deep condolences to Trudy and her family in the passing of her father. Those of us that knew him are going to miss him. They're going to miss him more. They need to remember the pleasant memories, and we need to, as a board, express our condolences.
Okay, we stand adjourned.